Hello. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope you all are enjoying these beautiful days that we have upon us right now. We'd be expecting either rain or cold or snow in this November, but we have sunshine and 74 degrees. And I wasn't aware of the weather. So I am making a fall dish that you can prepare today and enjoy, or you can prepare it for tomorrow and let the flavors get brighter and stronger, or freeze it. And that dish is chili, vegetarian chili, with a few extra Alexa Joan secrets that only you all will have access to. And I'm also making some cornbread. I'm using a recipe that is very near and dear to my family that I used to make when I was about 10 or 11 years old, when I was in charge of Sunday dinner cornbread. So without further ado, we're going to begin. And first, we're going to start with the vegetables for our chili. And then we're going to go into preparing the chili and getting that simmering on the stove. And then we're going to move over and work on the cornbread. So I understand I only have you until about 7 o'clock. So I'm going to try and stick to that time frame. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. And Randy will, be monitoring that. And let's get started. So first off, the veg. Yes, this is a vegetarian chili, but we still need more vegetables. And those vegetables are the base, just like with any other dish. With soup or with the stew or anything like that, you always need a flavor base. And that comes in with your aromatics. So we have today onion, simple white onion. We have garlic, bell pepper. Today we're using red and yellow because we want to make sure we have a good variety of color to our chili dish. And carrots and celery. The beans that I'm going to be using are garbanzo beans or chickpeas. I'm going to be using a red chili bean, which is a small red bean, not the wide kidney bean, and then black beans. And I'm choosing these beans for color and for texture. Sometimes those kidney beans, sometimes just, I know it's traditional to chili, but we're not making a traditional chili. So let's just explore. And you do not have to use the beans that I am using in this recipe. Feel free to use anything that you want to. If you want to use a cannellini bean with kidney beans, if you want to add lentils to your chili or corn to your chili, feel free to explore and be creative. That is one of my goals for this class. In addition to learning at least one thing new, also get inspired to be creative and do things that inspire you in the kitchen, or the flavors that inspire you or excite you in the kitchen. So here we are. So I've already started chopping one of my onions. So I will make sure here I'm using 2. So I'm chopping the second onion here, and I'm using a really sharp knife. And I'm making sure I'm cutting off the ends, both ends of the onion, so that I can dice it. And I'll show you how I like to dice my onion. You may see a few different color chopping boards here in front of me. And I would love to give you a really specific or scientific or culinary reason why I do that. I only do it for the cooking shows because I don't have time to clean the cutting boards in between each vegetable I'm cutting. So I make sure I layer my cutting boards. Some kitchens or some people would prefer to use different cutting boards for different types of ingredients that they're using. So for example, they would use a green cutting board for their vegetables, or a red cutting board for their red meats, or an orange cooking board for their chicken, or whatever colors they can use that they can remember. If you notice, I cut the onion in half, and then I sliced it, and I'll show you that again. It's very important when you're cutting that you always cut with the flat side or the flat surface of whatever you're cutting, so you don't injure yourself. So with the flat side down on my cutting board, I'm holding my knife the appropriate way with my thumb on the top part and my index curled on the back part. I create a claw with my hand so that I don't chop off any nails, especially if it were freshly manicured. And then I'm going to start slicing kind of against the grain first on the onion. And I'm making kind of, this is what you call maybe a medium dice, not a fine dice, not a large dice, but this is more of a medium dice. I want to taste and I want to see the onion, but I don't want to, you know, chomp down into any raw onion. Then I cut the onion in half bisectionally, and then I have my diced pieces. Very simple, very easy. And then the end part of the onion, I just finished chopping. And when I'm picking up my onion to put it into my bowl, I do not use my blade because that's going to dull it. I use the back of my knife, scoop it into my hand, and then put it into my dish. Simple. Next, I'm going to chop up some garlic. I have about 5 cloves of garlic. And this is the garlic with the skin on it. I just smash it to kind of break the skin. I'm smashing it because in this instance, I'm going to be mincing the garlic. If I were slicing or chopping the garlic, maybe I wouldn't do that because, you know, I would end up bruising it like that. But because I'm mincing it, I really don't care how it goes. I just want it cut. And again, using my claw from my hand, I'm just going to chop away. And I'm using the rocking motion, which is a safe way to do this and an easier way to do this. I just hold one end of my knife, the tip end, and I keep it down, and I rock the blade back and forth with the handle end. And that gives me a great chop. It gives me great control over my knife and keeps my fingers away from my knife because, you know, garlic is small. And, you know, if you're not doing it right, then you could really hurt yourself. All right, so that is those are my 2 perfumey aromatics, I guess I'll say. My garlic and my onion. And I'm going to move my cutting board. Next, I'm going to cut up my bell pepper. I've already cut up the red one. This is a yellow one. Remember, color. Food, when you're tasting food, it's more than just the flavors and the spices. It's actually the textures. It's the color. We eat with our eyes. Could you imagine a dish with cauliflower, boiled chicken, and mashed potatoes on it? Doesn't sound really appetizing. So getting as much color into your dish is so important. And a red pepper naturally has kind of like a square to it. So in order for easy cleanup, I'm going to cut it around, usually easy cleanup. I'm going to cut it around the seeds. But this pepper is not being very cooperative, so it's like leaving me a trail of seeds here. I'm going to discard the core. Most of the seeds are intact. And then I'm going to finish just slicing away the rest of my pepper. Try to make sure you get rid of as many seeds as possible. The worst thing you can do is bite into a red pepper seed that hasn't been roasted or anything. That will really hurt your teeth. And we don't want anybody going to the dentist. All right. And then I'm going to slice my pieces of pepper using my claw hand and holding my knife the correct way. I'm first going to cut slices. And then I'm going to cut cubes. So I'm just going to take a little bundle. I don't want to cut too much than I can handle. Only going to cut what I can handle. So that's just part of that for now. Scoop it up with the back of my knife, put it in my bowl, and grab my next little bundle. Now, chili is a dish that, you know, between different places and locations, the recipe can be very different. I'm from up north, so I think that's all I know. There's red-eye chili, there's Cincinnati chili, and I think some other chilies as well. This is my celery. I'm gonna cut up the stalk. I used 3 stalks for this. This is a 3rd one. I'm just gonna dice it, medium dice, so I kind of slice down the middle or slice the stalk into thirds, and then I'm just cubing it. Now, this recipe you can certainly use with meat. The only difference is that you would have to add the meat and you brown the meat and then add it to your chili. The flavors are still the same. Nothing's really changed. Next, my carrot. I'm gonna cut my carrot in 1/4 moons. I don't know if you can really see that. And I achieve that by first taking my nice carrot that's already been cleaned and peeled. The top's been taken off and the bottom's been taken off. I'm going to carefully cut it in half. Notice how I held that knife down so nothing wobbled because I was not cutting on a flat surface. So now I have a flat surface and I'm going to cut my half in 1/4. And that's my 1/4 moon. I'm going to do that with my second half. And then I am going to slice and dice. I'm going to add that to my celery. And I have 3 different dishes for my aromatics because they all cook at different rates and different paces. So I don't want to lump them all together. Otherwise, it's not going to taste very good. So follow me over to the stove. I think I have everything. All right, now this is where some of that sizzling magic takes place. I'm going to turn my heat on about medium. And I'm going to add in about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. And I want my oil to be heated. So I'm going to wait just a second and I'll be able to tell because I'll see ripples in my oil within the pan. And if I need to move the pan closer to the camera, I can definitely do that. All right. And you'll know, I kind of swirled it around. I just like to make sure the oil really coats the bottom of the pan. Because, you know, all your vegetables is going to be going over the bottom of the pan. So it's really important that you have oil everywhere. I'm going to add the onion and the garlic into my pan. Hear that sizzle? That's what you want to hear. And to my onion and my garlic, I'm going to add a pinch of salt. Now, depending upon who you're talking to and what type of chef you're speaking with, some chefs like to add salt to the onions, some chefs do not. Why? Well, it's a personal preference and what people have learned in their own kitchens. I have learned to salt the onions because what that is going to do is help release the liquid from the onion and help soften it. So it doesn't burn, but it softens very nicely and it almost gets to the point of caramelization. So whenever I'm cooking with onions, I always make sure I salt them. The other thing is, you notice I put my garlic in with my onion. Typically, I wouldn't do that, but because, again, I'm not caramelizing or cooking my onions really hard, I went ahead and added my garlic because it's not going to be in jeopardy of burning. And the liquid that's released from the onion is going to help it not burn. So that we're going to make sure we just let that cook a little bit so the onions can soften. And meanwhile, I am going to turn on my oven to 425 degrees because I have to start getting ready for my cornbread. You know, cooking is more than just being in the kitchen and throwing a few things in a pot. I'm sure, as I heard, somebody's a foodie on here. So being able to really be mindful and mindless in a way is really important when you're in the kitchen. I know in these times during COVID, during pandemic, during uncertainties in this virtual world, a lot of us are very stressed. So we need, even though we're constantly in our house, whether we're in our home office, in the bedroom, or in the living room with our family, we need one space where we can just go and turn everything off. And one of those places is in the kitchen. So whether you're washing the dishes, just allow your mind to go. You know, wherever it goes, let it go. And be mindful in the moment while you're washing dishes. It's the same thing with cooking. I'm here right now with these onions. I get to smell what they smell like while I'm cooking them. I get to listen to see if the sounds are changing, to see what might need to be added to the pan. And I'm kind of, thinking about what I'm creating in front of me. So I know you weren't planning on getting a whole mindfulness exercise during this cooking class, but you got it. All right, so those onions are almost to the translucent stage. And again, remember I told you I want to know that there are vegetables in this dish. So I don't want to completely soften the onion. So this is a really good stage for me to add in my peppers. So take a look at the onions again. So they're soft. They're not completely translucent. They're a little, not yellow, but they have a little of that tinge of color from the olive oil. So now I'm going to add in my pepper, my red and my yellow peppers. And I'm going to stir that right on in. And I'm going to let that go for just maybe about 2 minutes. While I'm doing that, I'll tell you about the spices I'm going to use. Of course, chili powder. I have two because this one is running out. This you can find at Tops, you can find at Price Right, you can find at Aldi's, you can find at Wegmans, any store. It's just regular chili powder. There's nothing special about it other than it's chili powder, and that's what you need for chili. I also have oregano, whole oregano. I have smoked paprika. And I'm not going to tell you my secret ingredients. I'll tell you my secret ingredients. Cinnamon. Cacao. Or cocoa if you don't have cacao. That's the secret. So I don't know if you all are saying, ew, that's not going to work right now, but trust me, it'll work. All right. So to my onions and my garlic and my pepper, I am going to add my oregano. I'm not really a measuring person. I know technically some people say I should be, but I'm not. Maybe about a tablespoon of oregano. And if you think you need more, you can always add it in later. Chili powder. I'm going to use probably about a good tablespoon of this, if not a tablespoon and a half. Many times when you look at a recipe that you see online, I always tell my students, add a bit more spice because recipes are developed for people, I'll say, with the mildest palate. So that's always what the recipe is going to be geared towards. If you know you have a stronger palate and like more flavor, put in some more spices, put in some more flavor, and have fun. So I'm going to add a little more chili powder. And then smoked paprika. About a half of a tablespoon. So that equals about 1.5 teaspoons. I can smell it already. Can you smell it? All right, so if I have the camera come in here a little closer, look at the color on those veg. That tells me I need a little bit more spice. I know, hard to believe, but you do. You need a little more because you don't want it to be bland. And if you like it hot, add a smidgen of cayenne pepper to it. Or if you want something a little different, add in a touch of chipotle peppers that are minced with the juice from the can. All right, now take a look at that. How does that look? I wish we had smell-o-vision because it smells really great right now. Okay, the next thing, my celery and carrots. And tomato paste. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of tomato paste. Now, there's a trick to using tomato paste. You don't just plop it into your dish. No. You need to fry it into your vegetables. That's right. You need to mix it in and let it cook. That's going to develop the flavor of the tomato paste. Cooking in that tomato paste is going to elevate the flavor of your chili. So again, don't just throw it in. It's from a can, so it's not gonna taste that great. All right, I'm at about 6:30 now. I want to make sure I get all the ingredients in, bring it up to a boil, and let it simmer because this doesn't have any meat in it. So ideally, I would like it to simmer at least 20 to 30 minutes. So that's what we're gonna try for. All right. So I have in my veg, my tomato paste, crushed tomatoes. This is 2 15-ounce cans of crushed tomatoes or diced tomatoes. You could also use crushed tomatoes, or you could use a 28-ounce can. All right. And then I'm going to stir that right on in. I stir every time I add something. Every time I add something to a dish, I always stir to incorporate. All right. Then I have, for more spice, my bay leaf. I have my black beans. I have my small red chili beans. And I have my garbanzo beans. Into my pot. Look at that bounty of beautifulness. Woo! I love that. Again, mix, mix, mix. Make sure the onions and the vegetables come from the bottom of the pan to the top of the pan. Make sure some of those beans get incorporated to the bottom of the pan with that tomato paste and those spices, and everything just comes together with a great, beautiful melange. All right, now I'm using chicken stock. I said these are vegetarian beans or chili, but today I'm using chicken stock just to give it an extra kick. You could use vegetable stock. You could even use water. I would recommend if you use water, make sure you add in more spices because that's where a lot of your flavor is going to come from. And this is something that would be great for, you know, a meatless Monday, or just to add something to your lunch where you don't get weighed down by heavy meat or something like that. Now, I am not filling my liquid to the top because I want this to cook down. I don't want this to be a soup. I don't want this to be a stew. Chili has a very specific consistency. And in order for that consistency to be achieved, you need to kind of boil out or simmer out the liquid. And then you need to combine this dish in a way so that you can thicken the sauce. So we're gonna bring this up to a boil. And while we do that, we're gonna start our cornbread. Hey, Randy, you got any questions in the chat or anything yet?
Oh, no, I don't think we have any questions right now. Somebody wants to get a copy of this video, and I'm going to see what I can do about that. But we have a lot of folks here that really agree with you on the meditative qualities of cooking. Some folks, Linda, likes to bake bread, and that's very meditative for her.
That is, and I have a feeling I know what, Linda, that is, because baking bread is so special to me. And I was actually telling my husband the other day, I don't eat bread, but I miss cooking bread because you get lost in the process of the kneading, and you get lost in the process of the creating and the proofing and watching it get nice and brown from the oven. So you're right. I will agree with that one.
So we just got a question from Jackie. If adding meat to this recipe, what time would you add that?
So what I would do if you were adding meat to this, what I would first do before I even add in the onion, I would brown the meat, because that meat is going to give you a little bit of the oil that you need in order to saute your onion and your vegetables. So first I would put in my meat, my ground meat. I would saute that up, get it nice and brown. And then I would remove it from the pot, put it to the side in a different container. And then I would add in the onion and the garlic and just carry the process on like that. And when I start adding everything back in, like the tomatoes and the beans, I'd add that ground meat right on in, even with all the liquids that accumulate at the bottom of the dish that you reserve it in. So all that reserved liquid, put it right back into, because that's flavor. And that's definitely something you want. You can add turkey. You can add a mixture of pork and beef. Some people like to use steak tips or cube meat, like, stew meat for their chili. Anything is a go. Anything is a possibility.
So, Chef, I grew up in the restaurant business, and I learned a lot about cooking from my grandmother back in the kitchen. And one thing she always told me about celery, because I know you use celery in this recipe, is that the flavor is in the leaves. Do you use any of the leaves?
This time I did not, but you'd be surprised. The flavor is definitely in the leaves for the celery. There are some dishes where I'll make sure that I incorporate the leaves of the celery, because it's a beautiful aromatic flavor that comes out. We've gotten away from using leaves of celery because we don't go out into the garden to pick up a head of celery anymore. So many times when we go into the grocery store, the leaves are already cut off, unless you purposely go to a grocery store that, gives you the full head of celery. So yes, I will agree. There's a lot of flavor in every single part of the celery. And I love stories and memories with family. So this is almost coming up to a boil. So what I'm going to do is let that actually come to the boil, but I want to start the cornbread. So follow me. Okay. Before I even tell you what ingredients are in my cornbread, I have to tell you the most important thing. Cast iron skillet. I love them. They've been around forever. They're passed down from generation to generation. And this one has been passed down to me from my grandmother. So I use it every time I make cornbread. And it's the perfect size. This is like, I think, a 10-inch one. I can't remember. 8-inch skillet. Look at that. It's just wonderful. All right. So move this. Half a stick of butter. I'm going to put it into my cast iron pot. And I'm popping this puppy in the oven. Typically, I'll put this in here while I'm preheating the oven. But since I already preheated it, I'll just put it in there for a little bit. And this is boiling. So I'm going to turn it down to a simmer. maybe about between 2 and 3. So low. And then, excuse my messy table here. Randy, as you know, being in the culinary and the kitchen, that chef should not have a messy station. Doesn't always work when you're doing a virtual cooking show. All right, so for my ingredients, I have cornmeal, I have flour, a little bit of sugar, baking powder, baking soda, salt, and buttermilk. All right, I'm gonna give you one quick tip for a plant-based cornbread. So this is not gonna be completely plant-based. You can always use like a earth balance type of margarine replacement for the butter if you wanted to. But if you don't want to have the buttermilk, I'm taking almond milk here, and I'm gonna add in to 12 ounces of buttermilk about 1 to 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. You can also use vinegar. And what that's gonna do, it's literally gonna curdle the almond milk, and it's going to give you the same effect as buttermilk. So I'm gonna let this sit while I work on my other ingredients, which are 2 eggs. 1, 2, and those get a nice little light beating. All right, I'm gonna put that aside while I wait for my buttermilk to process. And in a separate dish, I have my dry ingredients. So I have 1 cup of cornmeal, and this I'm just gonna pour right into my cup measure. If I'm a little bit over, that's okay. Remember, we're just, we're in the kitchen, we're cooking, we're being mindful, we're being free, we're enjoying ourselves. This is not stressful. And then I'm gonna take my flour. Now I do wanna make sure I kind of measure this appropriately. So I'm using a spoon. And I'm going to spoon my flour into my measuring cup. That way I don't end up adding too much flour, because flour is very light. Huh?
We got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, please, come on.
Yeah, so Linda was wondering if you ever add cream of tartar to your cornbread.
I have never added the cream of tartar to my cornbread. Was that a stabilizer or to make it rise a little more? Because cream of tartar is typically used like, just to firm up things or to stabilize things.
Yeah. So Linda, you can feel free to type that in. And while you do, Rita was wondering, is there a substitute for eggs for a vegan recipe?
Yes. So for the vegan recipe, substitution for eggs, you can use a flax egg, which is typically 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed to 3 tablespoons of water. And you stir that together and you let it sit just like you would your, plant-based buttermilk. And you let that sit until it thickens, and that can be substituted for your egg. You could also use chia seeds as your thickener, or you could use aquafaba. What is aquafaba? Well, this is a bean-based recipe, so you have a whole lot of aquafaba. Aquafaba is the liquid that the beans come in. And you can actually use that. It resembles and it mimics eggs very, very closely. So those are 3 of the substitutions you can use. So I have a bit of sugar. I'm using about anywhere from a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. We're not making Jiffy Pop, Jiffy cornbread. We're making homemade cornbread. So we don't want it to be overly sweet unless you just really like cornbread that way.
On those egg substitutes, Chef, how much per egg?
So for the flaxseed, that 1 tablespoon of flax to 3 tablespoons of water, that represents 1 egg. So you would multiply that by 2 for this recipe.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking. Please feel free to ask questions because, sometimes I just don't remember everything.
And Linda is telling us that the cream of tartar makes her cornbread a little less crumbly.
Ooh, interesting. I'm interested to know what that recipe looks like to see why you would need that. Because I'll show you what my cornbread looks like afterwards with TV magic. All right, now we have baking powder, which is 2.5 teaspoons. And like I said, this is a very old family recipe. But I just haven't really messed with it. Other than making it plant-based, I haven't changed a thing with it because it has memories for me, and I can't ever go wrong with it. This is baking soda. I always recycle my container, so it looks like baking powder. But this is a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And then I'm gonna use, see, recycling. I recycle a lot. Then I'm gonna use a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm gonna check on my butter. You can hit me with a couple more questions if you want. Ooh, ha ha ha. See? Butter melted perfectly. Now, here's the reason why I do this. Not only is my butter melted perfectly, my pan is automatically greased and buttered. So I'm gonna let that cool off a little bit because if I add it too soon, it's gonna curdle my eggs. All right, so first, let's mix up the dry ingredients to make sure everything is combined. Don't want anything left out. That's hot. Be careful. And then to my eggs, I'm not going to add all of my buttermilk right now. I'm going to add most of it. The reason why I say don't add all of it is because if you're using a egg replacer, it contains more liquid. So you may need to reduce the amount of liquid that you're putting into your cornbread. So start out with maybe about 3/4 of the amount of the plant-based milk. Put it with your eggs, mix it up, then add your dry, and then check the consistency. If it's really stiff and thick and doesn't really look like thickened pancake batter, then you need more liquid. I turn the light on again? Okay. So I'm gonna add about 1/2 of my milk. A little more because I know I'm gonna need it. Mix that up. And I'm going to add my dry to my wet. Confession, I don't always do it like this. I'm doing it because this is the correct way to do it. And this is the book way to do it, but I don't like washing dishes. So I usually just try and do it in one bowl. So when I do that, I mix up all of my dry ingredients and then I add my wet ingredients to it. Give me all my secrets. All right, so this is a consistency. I need more liquid. So I'm gonna add some more. And cornbread is a really easy recipe. Yeah, sometimes you can get in trouble with it if you're not really measuring it, because it's very possible that you could add too much liquid and then you try and, add enough dry to compensate for the amount of liquid that you added, and then you go back and forth, and then you just have way more cornbread than you need. We're not going to do that. All right, this is the consistency I want for this cornbread, especially using the plant-based milk. It's a little thinner than it would be if you were using buttermilk. Now, with all this wonderful melted butter, plop, right into my batter. It's a final piece. And I make sure I mix it in really well, because I want to make sure that butter gets into the cornbread, because it's going to improve the flavor. And then I'm gonna pour it into my hot pan. And if it starts cooking along the edge, that's fine. It's actually even better. Now remember, this cast iron pot is hot. So let's take it with the oven mitt, put it right in the oven, 20 to 25 minutes. I'll start it for 20 and then I'll check it and see if it needs more time. Always do that. Do not go for the full 25 minutes because depending upon your stove, you may end up burning your chili, your cornbread. Now I'm back to my chili. Really hasn't been that long. So it's still a little raw, but that's okay. And I'm gonna taste it in a little bit, see what the flavor is like. Now, with vegetarian chili, I did mention that you want the consistency to be more like a chili and not a minestrone. So you have to either puree or mash or use an immersion blender to get some of that thickness with the vegetables. And if you are cooking for restricted diets, or if you're cooking for people that have health concerns, for example, you can't use thickeners like flour because someone has celiac disease or something like that. This is one of the techniques that you would use in order to thicken your sauce in an effort to compensate for not having the flour. So you would, blend it up, take maybe a third of this, put it in your blender and blend it up and then pour it back in. And those vegetables, once liquefied, are going to help thicken. All right, so because I'm not going to use a blender, I'm going to go old school. This is an old school dish, right? And I got old school cornbread. So I'm going to take my little old school potato masher. You could also use a ricer if you have a ricer, but don't put really hot chili into a ricer. That wouldn't be good. We want everybody to be safe. And I'm just going to mash some of this in order to thicken up the texture. I don't know if you can see it, but it's already getting a little thicker and you can already see some bits of the bean that's been mashed up. See how that's getting nice and thick? And if it's a little too liquidy for you, we're gonna boil it a little more. Now, chili, just like soup, improves over time. So if you want, to really understand what that flavor is gonna be like, after you season it to where you want it to be, throw it in the refrigerator and let it sit overnight and then enjoy it the next day for the full flavor. So I'm gonna taste this right quick to see what else it needs. It may need a little more salt because I didn't add that much. But if you don't want to add salt because you are trying to stay away from salt, you could add things, which is what I'm going to add in a little bit, a little vinegar. You could add a little bit of soy sauce, low sodium soy sauce. If you're using meat, you could add Worcestershire sauce. I always mispronounce that word, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, just to get a little bit more of that flavor or more spices.
Chef, do you rinse your canned beans?
Yes, I did not show you that part, which is why they were in the glass container. If I'm not making beans on my own, for example, dry beans, yes, I rinse my beans like 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I start with low sodium beans, but I still rinse them because you just never know. So to get as much extra sodium that might have been hanging out in the aquafaba or that liquid, I make sure I rinse it several times. That's good. I'm gonna kick it up a bit though. First, I need to add I need to add some more paprika. And one thing I didn't tell you, whenever you're using canned tomatoes, you gotta add it a touch of sweetness. So like a little bit of sugar. And what that sugar is gonna do is kind of, you know, get rid of that tinny flavor. So just a couple pinches of sugar, not too many. You don't want sweet chili. And then I'm going to add a hit of my cinnamon. I would say maybe a teaspoon to 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. I don't want to know that I put cinnamon in the dish. I want the cinnamon to be like a third or fourth flavor that you're like, I taste something different. The other thing that I want to add to this is cumin. You don't always have to put cumin in your chili, but sometimes you need that extra smokiness. So the smoked paprika this time is just not giving me the smokiness I need. So I'm going to add a little bit of cumin, and I'm going to still add in my cocoa powder. So I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of cumin. Now remember, I told you, creativity. If it's not working for you, add in something that does. If it's too bitter, add in a little bit of sweet. If it's too salty, well, you got to put a potato or something in there to absorb that salt. Yeah, you gotta balance the flavors.
Chef, I got to tell you, the cumin was a real crowd pleaser. There's a very positive reaction among the gallery.
You know, sometimes I try other people's, you know, recipes or flavors, but cumin along with granulated garlic are two spices that I keep in my cabinet. And I have to have them in there because I add them to the majority of my dishes. Now that was maybe about 2 teaspoons to 1 tablespoon of the cocoa. I know I got a lot of cooks in my kitchen right now. So what other suggestions or thoughts do you all have about your chili? Oh, that's looking beautiful. And like I said, adding corn to this, adding lentils to this would have been great as well. I try to keep it a little simple. All right, now this is smelling and looking really good.
So folks, if you have a question, we have just about 5 minutes left with Chef Alexa. So you can throw those right in the chat box. This has been wonderful so far.
Yes, now with my auto TV magic, because a chef is always prepared with their mise en place, I'm going to show you my cornbread. Ta-da! This is my cornbread, fresh from the oven. And it's, you know, you can see that with that cast iron, you got a nice, beautiful crust on there because you see right from the lifting on the edges, that's where it started to cook. And then, let's see, I slice this puppy open. You can serve this, you know, when you take it out of the oven, put a little bit of butter on top to make sure it absorbs and get that extra beautiful butteriness into it. And then you can cut it into cubes or you can cut into triangles. Let's see, what do you want, cubes or triangles? I don't know. Let's do some triangles. Look at that. Beautiful. And this is like the perfect. Put butter right in between there. Now, I don't know if that's what you meant by adding cream of tartar, Linda, but you know, there's a traditional crumb to it, but that to let you know that you're actually working with cornbread or tasting cornbread, it still has the grittiness of the corn, not too gritty, but just, you know, that it's the cornmeal in there. If you wanted to make this gluten-free, you could substitute 1-to-1 the flour that you added to this and make sure you just use a gluten-free mix or blend. Make sure that your your baking powder and your baking soda are gluten-free. If you are working with something like that. And I mentioned the plant-based butter. I mentioned the plant-based milk, and I mentioned the plant-based egg. I think that was everything. I didn't get a chance to plate my chili, but I can if you want me to, Randy.
So absolutely. And while you're getting ready to do that, a couple questions. Latoya says she always adds Cajun seasoning to her chili. And
Add what?
Cajun seasoning.
Oh, I can see how that would work. Yes.
All right. And Rita's asking about, do you ever put jalapenos in your cornbread?
Yes, in my cornbread, yes, that would be so great. You could put cheddar in your cornbread. You could put whole kernel corn in your cornbread. There's also a recipe that I grew up with called corn pudding, which is a combination of cornbread as well as like cream corn and regular corn. And this chili, because it's vegetarian, if you feel it's not going to be enough for you, you can always serve it over rice or you can serve it over pasta. And to top it off, and I have one trick that I forgot to tell you all about, so I'll tell you in a second, but you can also top your chili. This is cilantro or culantro, depending upon which one you're using. And you can do just a nice little simple chop with a dollop of sour cream or plant-based yogurt on top of your chili. And there you have your beautiful chili dish. Like I said, you can always add in your pasta or your rice. Now, one trick I want to tell you, see this nice, wonderful big can of tomato paste. It seems like, I mean, it's only cost like what, 79 cents, maybe $1. It always seems like a waste to use tomato paste, and a lot of people don't use it because they don't know what to do with the rest of it. So I have some parchment paper, I have a pan, and I have a little scoop. You can always use your spoon. I'm going to dollop this onto my parchment paper. I'm going to freeze it. And once it's fully frozen, I'll just put in a bag. And then when I need a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, guess what? I'll take it right from the freezer. And I have not wasted my little 79 cents. And there you have it. Am I right on time?
Chef, you are right on time. And just a couple last minute comments. Some
Please.
of our audience feel like they're just getting teased with that cornbread. They'd like a piece right now. We have some folks that use some sausage in the recipe as well.
In their cornbread recipe?
I believe so. I believe that's what we were talking about when Jackie mentioned that. And Rita suggested you can throw some spinach in the chili to sneak in some leafy green veggies, spoken like a true mom.
Absolutely.
And yeah, this looks absolutely fantastic. And before we leave, I have to give credit to your camera person who's done a phenomenal job giving us great angles. I know that I learned a lot from this. I picked up some knife skills. That trick with the tomato paste is fantastic because I can't tell you how many cans of tomato paste I've thrown away not using them.
Yes.
So, Chef, thank you so much. Our next class is going to be November 16th at 1 o'clock. And if you're with us
Yes.
today, we'll send you a reminder with the login information. And please tell your friends and family how great this was. We also have somebody, I forget who, they're going to actually make this recipe tonight. So next time we get together, they can tell us all about it. Chef
Absolutely.
Alexa, thank you so much. Keith, thank you for your IT help. Cameraman, whoever you are, great job. Folks, on behalf of AARP, thank you for joining us, and you all have a nice night.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Chef.
You're welcome. Let
Nice
me know how
being
it
in your
turned out
kitchen.
if you make it.
Nice
Thank
being
you,
in your
Chef.
kitchen, Alexa.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
That cornbread looks amazing.
I know, I want a piece right now.
It's really good.
I got a problem over here.
You'll have to share your recipe with me, Linda.
It wasn't me. I'm not the baker. I
Oh,
don't
you're
know.
not
No.
okay, well, another one, but I'll have to find out that other cream of tartar recipe.
Yeah. Okay, good night. Peace.
Good night.